Good evening or good afternoon. I'm very happy that I can present my paper on the conference. In this presentation, I will try to explain why the Vedic definitions of the concept of Indra connected with the meaning of liberating cognition. Firstly, I will quote two examples of these definitions. Then I will argue that in order to understand their meaning, we have to go back to the Rig Veda and to understand the meaning of the motive of Indra's fight with Vritra as referring not only to creation of cosmos and society, as for example Whitaker proposes in his book Strong Arms and Drinking Strength, but also to obtaining supernatural cognition under the influence of Soma, which is a means of change in the cosmic and social dimensions. Although the conclusions of my research presented here are drawn upon cognitive analysis of mental processes, due to lack of time, I will not be able to present this analysis. Those who are interested in it can find it in my book, Fire and Cognition in the Rig Veda, I mean methodology. So let us begin with the examples of definitions of Indra in the Shatapatha Brahmana and Aitareya Upanishad. The same breath in the midst is doubtless Indra. He, by his power, Indriya, kindled those other breaths and from the midst, and inasmuch as he kindled Indra, he is the kindler, Indra. The kindler, indeed, him they call Indra, mystically, for the gods love the mystic. They, the breaths being kindled, created 7 separate men. And in the Aitareya Upanishad, after he was born, he contemplated the creatures with the thought, will anyone declare there to be another here? But he saw only that man, the Brahman, the utmost. And he said, this Idam I have seen, Adarsham. Therefore he is called Idandra. Now his name is Idandra, but even though he is Idandra, people cryptically call him Indra, because the gods somehow love the cryptic. In my book, Fire and Cognition, I argue that the religious motive or a story about Indra who kills Vritra was redefined in such a way that it could be used as a model simultaneously expressing so-called defining events. Defining events are the descriptions of life-giving processes and are presented as evolving according to the same scenario of appearance of light from darkness. Exaltation with the Soma is one of the defining events. The state of lack of supernatural cognition is conceived in terms of darkness of the night or the state of being enclosed in a dark cavern. Appearance of supernatural cognition is conceived in terms of a herd of radicals or bright horses running out from a cavern, or the outflow of streams of clarified butter, which is bright too. The model of Indra's fight with Vritra uses the same scenario, which is the appearance of light out of darkness. Darkness is conceived in terms of a snake from which bright waters flow. I will show that in the Rig Veda, this model also expresses supernatural cognition, realized thanks to Soma, which is not surprising taking into account that we are explicitly told that Indra drinks Soma before his fight, and that under its influence, Indra grows and becomes strong enough to kill Vritra. Within the frames of this conceptualization, in terms of Vritra, the mental state before somic cognition begins is conceived. Appearance of thinking is usually conceived in terms of appearance of waters. I will show that the conceptualization of supernatural cognition in terms of Indra's fight with Vritra allows the poet to single out the stages of supernatural cognition thanks to its clear consecutive stages. Indra drinks Soma, grows, kills Vritra, and releases waters. I will also argue that it is because of this meaning of the model, the concept of Indra became in later thought an important concept connected with supernatural cognition performed without Soma. There are many descriptions of Indra's fight with Vritra in the Rig Veda which activate the meaning of somic exaltation. I discuss some of them in Fire and Cognition. Here, I want to focus on a late hymn, 10.153, which has also been analyzed by Whitaker in his book. And Whitaker is interested in social meaning of the hymn, as he is interested in it throughout of his book. My interpretation should be treated as a complementary to that of Whitaker, because this is how the Rigvedic poets composed their hymns. They wanted to activate as many defining events as possible in one stanza or a hymn construed to facilitate this activation. So the first stanza. This stanza creates an image of newborn Indra surrounded by females. This image is elaborated in the Rig Veda in the model of child of the waters described in Rig Veda 2:35, where the child is Agni surrounded by waters. The females are qualified as Inkhayanti, the meaning of which is to move backwards and forwards, move up and down. In Rig Veda 7.8.8.3, ink, the verb ink, denotes the movement of a swing, in terms of which the sun is conceived, on which Varuna and the poet are present. So the recipient might easily create an image of rippling water surrounding Indra. He may also create an image of a child rocked by the females. The females are also qualified as apasyu, which again may activate an image of incessantly rippling waters. But this form is also used in very specific contexts of preparation of soma. It qualifies hands and fingers which produce somic juice, streams with which somic juice is mixed, various factors of the final form of soma conceived as females, thoughts which produce soma, and non-soma in this context refers to mental transformation. Finally, the form apasyu also qualifies dawns, among which Agni appears. All these contexts activate the model of child of the waters, and taking into account this fact, we can say that the image of Indra surrounded by females activates both the descriptions of production of somic juice and supernatural cognition gained thanks to it. I argue that the poet does not focus here on the physical birth of Indra, but on his birth as Indra, as the one who killed Vritra, as the Rig Veda repeats. So the poet fuses preparation of somic juice and drinking soma by Indra in order to describe the process during which Indra becomes himself. He becomes someone who is able to perform his definitional action. The fact that Indra drinks soma is also confirmed by verse C of the first stanza. In the model of child of the waters, described in Rig Veda 2:35, a relationship between Agni and waters is conceived, among other, in terms of relationship between the son and his mothers, cows or mares, which feed him. And the idea of feeding is present also here, since the females, whatever they are conceived of, feed Indra. And this is evoked metonymically in the abstract expression Bhajanasah Suviriam. Whitaker and Jamison Brereton interpret this form of Bhaj as the activity directed towards the subject. However, in many hymns of the Rig Veda, this verb is used to express the activity directed from the subject to a lot or a portion. And I assume that this meaning can also be activated here. Waters allot the manly power, Suvirya, to Indra, and then they take share of it when they are released by Indra in the form of cosmic waters, rivers, and rain. Verses A-B of the second stanza state that Indra was born thanks to power, and power is named by three words, Bala, Ojas, and Sahas. Analysis of the use of these nouns would go beyond the scope of my paper, but it should be noted that while Bala often means manly physical power, as Whitaker interprets it, he writes that the second stanza states that Indra's birth comes from physical power, and he enumerates all the nouns. The nouns Sahas and Ojas do not often express physical power as connected with human manliness, but rather supernatural power, maybe also in human being, but supernatural power gained thanks to Soma. I will limit myself to state that ojas is mostly used in instrumental case in the Rig Veda to denote the power with which Indra kills Vritra, which means, of course, supernatural power. As far as sahas is concerned, it should be noted that the very common expression sahasaksunuh is a conventionalized epithet of Agni, used in many stanzas. Indra is also called by this epithet. So when the hymn states that Indra appears thanks to sahas, he is also identified with Agni as the son of this power. Sahas is also the power which is given to Indra by Soma, and it is this power with which Indra kills Vritra too. So verses A-B describe the moment when Soma is drunk by Indra and transforms him into someone strong enough to kill Vritra. This transformation is conceived in terms of warming up, which can be seen in the implied identification of Indra and with Agni via the expression Sahasaksunuh and the model of the child of the water. The reason of which this identification can be found in that somic exaltation was conceived in terms of warming up the drinker as kindling fire internally, which is expressed explicitly in Rig Veda 8:48:6. This transformed form of Indra is conceived in terms of a bull, which is expressed in verse C. The analysis of the concept of Vrishan again goes beyond this analysis, this paper, but it should be noted that almost the same verse appears in Rig Veda 9:642, where Soma is called Vrishan, Satyam Vrishan Vrishedasi. So the fact that Indra is called almost in the same way as Soma is confirms my interpretation that Indra becomes the same with the Soma that fills him, which in fact is in accord with the experience food and drink become part of the eater or drinker. And in the Rig Veda, Soma is called the essence Atman of Indra. Atmendrasya. So the next stanza, in my interpretation of the next stanza, I will leave apart the cosmic interpretation of this stanza, its cosmic interpretation discussed by Whitaker, and focus on its cognitive meaning. The stanza presents the next stage of exaltation. Indra, transformed by Soma into a bull, overcomes the initial lack of supernatural cognition, which is conceived in terms of killing Vritra. He is the smasher of Vritra, verse A. Thus, he creates space, which can be understood not only in cosmic or social dimensions, but also as internal space, which appears in supernatural cognition. Here you have examples. So Indra, as the creation of space, experiences the next stage of supernatural cognition, which is somehow a kind of experience of internal space, and creation of this internal mental space is conceived in the Rig Veda in terms of rising to the sun at its zenith, which is metonymically expressed by qualification of Indra as the supporter of the sky. And we have next stanza. This stanza is construed in such a way that it also conveys the meaning of the next stage of supernatural cognition, complementary to social and cosmic meanings. We can extract from the stanza the basic frame describing Indra's struggle with Vritra. This is the expression Tvam Indra Bibharshi Bahavo Vajram. It evokes conventionalized expressions about Indra, who carries the thunderbolt in his hands, Bahvo. However, Indra has already killed Vritra, as it has been said in the previous stanza. So the present stanza, describes his further activity. What kind of activity can it be? I tried to find videos on the internet about killing a snake with a stick. which I consider to be a motivating experience for the story. I found only one, and I have no experience in this matter myself. But I think that we can reconstruct Indra's further activity in the following way. Indra holds his vajra vertically in his hands, perhaps still stuck in the head of the snake, and the upper end of vajra reaches the sky, and in this way vajra supports the sky. But since Soma in the Rig Veda is identified with Vajra, which stands vertically, and Indra is identified with Soma, as we have seen, the recipient may understand that now Indra and Vajra are one, and that the next form of Indra exalted with Soma is conceived in terms of Vajra. The cognitive meaning of this stanza can be seen in that the closest direct object of the Vibharshi is not Vajra, but Arka, light or song, end song, not all, but end song. The fact that Arka and Vajra are the direct objects of Vibharshi implies their identity, also based on the fact that both create sound and light. So the recipient can understand that now Indra expresses his supernatural cognition in a hymn or a song conceived in terms of the lightning and the sound of thunder, which falls down to the ground. Creation of song is also expressed in verse C, where Vajra is presented as being sharpened by Indra. Sorry. Something wrong with my computer. Fine. So, again, the meaning of the verb shashi needs a separate analysis. I have done it partly in Fire and Cognition in the Rig Veda. For the moment, I will say that it is used in the following contexts. Literally, it is used to denote sharpening of metal, of which axes and knives are made, and of the weapon of Indra, that is Vajra, usually, not always. It is also, this verb is also metaphorically used to denote kindling of fire and preparation of Soma. Conceptualization of these processes in terms of sharpening is based on the main feature of the source domain, that is the concept of sharpening, which gives its categories to other concepts, like, for example, kindling fire or purification of Soma. This is the main feature of this process, is making an object clean and bright. Moreover, there are many stanzas in which the poets are sharpened or ask the gods for being sharpened. It is then implied that the poets undergo a process conceived as becoming clean and bright. This process is explicitly expressed in late hymn of the Rig Veda 10.108, where the seers are qualified as sharpened by Soma, which allows us to understand that supernatural cognition was conceived in terms of sharpening. In another stanza, Indra is asked to sharpen the one who is sharpened by Soma. Other stanzas also confirm that supernatural cognition was conceived in terms of sharpening. For example, the poets ask the gods to sharpen their songs, and the insightful thoughts, Dhi, will, kratu, and skill, daksha. And since Arka and Vajra are implicitly identified in our hymn, not only they are carried by Indra in his arms, but also when Vajra is sharpened, song is sharpened too. We can say that the fourth stanza expresses the process of perfection of Indra's song, created under the influence of Soma. And the last stanza, also it would be good to analyze it more. For the moment, I will only say that the form Abhibhu appears 6 times in the Rig Veda, in all cases in reference to Indra, and in 3 cases in reference in the same context where Indra dominates over all beings. But apart from the cosmic and social meanings, the stanza expresses the conviction that thanks to his supernatural cognition, which has been described earlier, Indra surpasses other beings. Finally, as Whitaker and earlier Schmidt have shown, Indra is a prototypical sacrificer with whom a human sacrificer identifies during sacrifice. Whitaker writes that Soma plays a fundamental role in fusing divine and human realms in Rigvedic ritual performances and literally in a man's body, and mapping Indra's identity and exploits onto the idealized image of Aryan man. My interpretation of Indra's fight with Vritra explains how Soma could play its fundamental role of fusing divine and human realms and in ritual. Soma is the factor of supernatural cognition, during which Indra appeared inside man as the main actor of cognition, and with which the poets identified themselves as those who perform supernatural cognition, conceived in terms of killing Vritra, experiencing creation of space, and creating a song, which in our hymn is conceived in terms of sharpening vajra, but in many other places is conceived as creation of water. In our hymn, in stanza 4, the song Arka is qualified as sajoshas, which means associated together, united, acting together, because this song is produced not only by Indra, but together with the sacrificer identified with him. I hope that my analysis has shown the Rigvedic roots of the connection of Indra with supernatural cognition. In the description of the Shatapatha Brahmana, the main breath which heats itself is called Indra. The way of description directly continues the Rigvedic descriptions of the influence of Soma, which consisted on warming up. In the Shatapatha Brahmana, there was no Soma, but memory of its influence remained and was refreshed every time when texts were recited. And the descriptions of Prajapati's creative activity, which begins with toiling and heating, reflect the attempts to get the supernatural mental transformations without Soma, but preserving the main physical symptoms of its influence and connection of Indra with supernatural cognition. In time of the older Upanishads, the ways of getting supernatural cognition did not involve heating, but the concept of Indra as connected with mental transformation remained, as it is attested in the Aitareya Upanishad, but also in Chandogya Upanishad, when Indra comes to Prajapati for teaching about the self, Atman, and in other places. Thank you very much for your attention.